My couch had been torn to shreds. I'd been stabbed a couple of times, like with this utility knife, and there was a photo album out, and it had all my pictures from like my senior prom, and all of my photos of my face had been torn up and like cut up. And I walked into my room, and it was clear that somebody had laid on the bed. And there was a bunch of like my undergarments like strewn around the room, and the room was just in complete like shambles.
I'm Jake Deptula.
And I'm Jamie Beebe.
On today's episode of Strictly Stalking, we're chatting with Liz, who was just 18 years old when she first encountered her stalker.
One night before leaving work, she saw a long-haired, tall, skinny man lurking in the parking lot. When Liz opened her car, she found an anonymous note that simply read, "It sucks to be invisible, huh?"
For the next 8 years, her stalker would leave her obsessive and threatening notes, stalk her outside the daycare where she worked, vandalize her car, and eventually break into her house.
When Liz moved away, hoping to leave her stalker behind, she came home to her new house and found a note that read, "I found you, invisible girl."
Now she's here to share her story with us. Liz, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you guys for having me.
So tell us what life was like for you right before the stalking began.
Well, I was at a good point in my life. I had just graduated high school. I was a freshman in college, and things were going good. I thought, here's the next step into my career path, and like churning into adulthood and figuring things out. And then all of a sudden, all of my plans just got torn to shreds as soon as that day happened, and everything started happening.
Tell us about that day when you saw the guy lurking in the parking lot.
So I was working at a local pizza joint, and I was alone. It was really, really dead for a Sunday afternoon. It was really weird, but I was mid-shift and I was the only waitress, and I was cleaning off a table, and I just happened to notice something out of the corner of my eye and looked out the big window and saw this guy just standing in the middle of the parking lot. It was just kind of weird, and he was just kind of a really intimidating looking guy. He had this long black hair. He was skinny and tall, and he just stared into the thing, and I was like, well, maybe he's going to order a pizza. And so I just waited, brushed it off for a little bit, and he just stood there for about 10 minutes, and then I finally realized, something might be wrong. And so I went to go grab my supervisor from the back, and just told him what was going on. I said, hey, you might want to go check on this guy and make sure he's okay. And by the time we got back out, he was gone.
What happened when you went to your car after you left work?
So after I got off of work, my mom was with me. We were going to go visit my brother. She'd come to have a piece of pizza, and I was going to my car, and I saw that the door was open just a little bit, just a hair, and I was like, okay, that's really uncommon. I'm really good about closing my door because I was a college student. You got expensive textbooks in there. But I opened the door, and there was a note sitting on my driver's seat, and it said, "It sucks to be invisible, huh?" And at first I was like, okay, maybe it's one of my coworkers playing a prank. My best friend worked at the restaurant at the same time I did, and she wasn't working that day. I was like, maybe she took this opportunity to play a prank on me. And so I kind of just brushed it off at first, not thinking it was anything.
How long did that go on before you realized that it wasn't one of your friends?
I asked everybody at work. I was like, I texted them. I was like, haha, very funny, and sent them a picture. And, everybody swore up and down it wasn't them. A couple days later, I received another note when I was at work. That's when he started confessing that he was in love with me. And so he, I think he said something like, we can be invisible together. And we don't need anybody else, is basically along the lines of what the next note said. And I started really thinking about it hard, because this was at the daycare. So I was working at the pizza place and the daycare. And so this was during the week when I was at the daycare, and it was on my windshield. And I was like, okay, this is really weird. And that's when I started thinking through. I was like, okay, it's not my coworkers, it's not my friends, and not my brother. And so I actually went home that night, and I remember sitting down with my mom, and I said, Mom, I think something's going on. I think somebody might be watching me. I just keep getting these notes, and it's just kind of weird. And I said, I don't know. but that's all I had to go on. So I just kind of told her, and she's like, well, we'll just see what happens. And that's when it started really happening a lot.
How did it escalate from the notes?
So the next thing I got was a bouquet of flowers at work. I walked in, and my secretary, I said, whose birthday is it? And she's like, oh no, your boyfriend bought you these. And I was like, I don't have a boyfriend. And I asked her to describe him, and she described this guy that was tall and skinny with long black hair. And he dropped them off and, knew that I was at school and dropped them off and said, this will be for her when she gets here. And then I sort of started thinking through it. I thought long black hair, and then immediately my mind went back to the guy at the pizza place in the parking lot. And then from then on, I realized, where I'm at, long black hair on a man is not very common. And so I realized that there'd been a couple of times where I had gone to Walmart after work, like to grab something, or I'd go to the bookstore, and I'd noticed a long black hair on a guy, and just started noticing him in different places that I was at, and that's when I really made the connection.
How did it make you feel when you realized that he had been following you?
Um, it's kind of just like a moment where it feels like you're being dunked into a tank of cold water. It's just a matter of shock. I just remember thinking through it, but I had no proof. Like, I had no proof it was this guy, even though the secretary had seen him. But at that point, it was still early, even though I was getting notes every day, and then I had gotten the flowers, and it was just kind of like I started, just quietly going inside of myself and not saying anything and just kind of shutting down.
What aspects of your life did you start changing when you realized that this was really happening and you were scared?
Well, I started carrying pepper spray because I was only 18. I had a knife, I had a pocket knife, and I had one male teacher at the preschool, and then I had the cooks at work just walk me out to my car at night. And I just became really paranoid and reasonably paranoid, but paranoid nonetheless. And just I always locked my car triple times before I walked into somewhere. So, and I'd always check over my shoulder, and if somebody came in and had long black hair, even if it was a woman and I knew it was a woman, I had to see their face before I was okay with, realizing this is not him. So,
What kind of other stuff did he or your stalker do during this time?
at one point, I came home after work. It was a stressful day, and I'd left something in my car, so I ran down to go get it. We lived in a cul-de-sac, and so I had to park at the bottom of the cul-de-sac, and we had a big cattail bush down there. And I was going to my car. I grabbed whatever I was grabbing. I think it was my backpack, and I heard rustling behind me, and all of a sudden I saw him just kind of hop out. And I was the only person home at the time because I was still living with my family. And so I screamed and I ran up the hill because I didn't have my pepper spray on me. I didn't have my knife because I was just going to the car. And I called the police, and they showed up about 15 minutes later, and he was gone. Of course, he was gone. So that was the hard thing. And then one night at the daycare, I had left, and I got a call from one of my coworkers, and all the teachers had to walk their trash down to the dumpster at the end of the night. And she had walked down there to throw her trash away, and he was actually sitting behind the dumpster and hopped out, thinking it was me. And so she screamed and ran back to the daycare, and they called the police, and he was gone.
Did you get a good look at him when he hopped out?
Yes, I was able to confirm. That was the moment that I knew, like, I confirmed everything. I knew that this was the guy that was following me because he had the long black hair. I was able to get a few more details in, like he was wearing a t-shirt, and he had like a round black tattoo that was just visible under a t-shirt sleeve at the edge of it, and like he had blue eyes. And so that's what I knew was important at the end of the day, was this is a step in the right direction, but at the same time, he's getting worse. Like, he's getting more bold.
And what was going on other than that in your life at this time?
Well, I was still going to school, but I was starting to miss classes. Didn't want to go to work. I started just staying in. Like, everything, at any moment I felt like he could come follow me. And at the daycare, we had other teachers during the day because I came in second shift, so I came in the afternoon, and they would say they saw him walking on the sidewalk down the hill from the daycare, and he'd just walk all day and look up at the daycare. And so I just kind of I think that's when the depression really started coming in and the anxiety. And so I didn't trust anybody. I didn't hang out with my friends. Um, Being at work was horrible. At any moment he could have walked into, the daycare or the pizza place and done whatever he wanted to do. So that was crippling. When I first went to the police, the first couple times I called, they were like, okay, are you sure you saw this? Is the guy, it was really uncommon, and it sounded too scary to be true, is what one cop actually told me at one point. He said, "That sounds like a horror film." And I said, "Yeah, now you know how I'm feeling right now." So a lot of the police officers kind of just took it like, we'll make a report. We didn't see anybody. Well, of course you didn't see anybody. You showed up, 15, 20, 30 minutes later, and he's gone. So that was the most frustrating thing, is these people that are supposed to be helping you and protecting you, are just kind of laughing it off.
So they didn't encourage you to file any reports or anything else beyond that?
I had one detective that sort of took it seriously, and he said, you need to start taking like extensive journals. Like, you need to tell me who you called on dispatch, who you spoke to, like who, what time it happened, how you felt at that moment, like everything, taking any photos that I could of any kind of evidence or like letters or anything. He really was the one that kind of encouraged me. And, you know, basically he was saying, you're on your own, but here's where you start. And so that's when I started, I have like a binder full of, 8 years worth of evidence. Um, but at one point, I called the police to ask them about one of the letters, because up until that point, I had been giving them any letters that I received so they could put it in evidence. Well, they let me know that they had lost a few, like it was gone. They didn't know where the letters were, nothing. So they actually lost a few pieces of my evidence. So that's when I started making like copies and extensive copies. So they could take the evidence, but I would make sure that I had pictures and everything, that, if they lost it, I had the proof. So I wound up quitting the daycare because I couldn't handle it. And the daycare the instructors wouldn't help me with the cameras or anything. Um, the police stopped patrolling because it scared the parents, and reasonably so. I mean, I get it. But I just couldn't handle it. And my mind was always thinking, if he comes in, he does something, and one of these kids get hurt, I automatically would just shut down. Like, I would feel so guilty if something happened. I quit. And I did the same thing the next place. And then I think for almost 2 years, I just stayed in, and I was just really depressed. I didn't get out of bed. I didn't do anything. So finally, when I decided to go to makeup school, was when, I saw a light. That was the point where I really turned around and said, this could be a good opportunity. I'm going to a different place, and um, maybe he'll finally go away. So, but that didn't happen.
What was entering makeup school like? How did that change your life?
Well, I'd always been in theater and like local film festivals, and I loved it. I loved doing just working on set. And I was never an actor. My brother was always the actor of the family, and so I was kind of little sister that was falling behind and liked seeing like the makeup, the wigs, and the costumes. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like, I don't want to just be this kid with Party City liquid latex and just doing makeup on the side. I want to do this professionally. And so it took a while for my parents to get on board, but they came around and they supported me, and I got into one of the best makeup schools in the country. And I did a 6-month special effects program and loved it. So it was my therapy. It was, this is going to sound really weird, but making monsters was my way to like control the horror of everything that was going on with the stalker. Like, I had control over that, whereas in my stalking situation, I didn't. So that was my therapy, and like still is to this day. Help me kind of control those, like that anxiety, and help me kind of work through everything that I was going through at the time.
Were you being stalked while you were in makeup school as well then?
For about a month, everything was fine. Everything was good. You know, it was a new start. I was excited. And um, we had been out one night after school, and I came back, and there was a note on the door of our apartment. And I just immediately just got cold, and like my roommates didn't know what was going on because I didn't say anything to them. And so at that point, I had to make the hard conversation with my roommates and say, you know, this is happening, and he's back. Found me.
How did they react once you told them what had happened to you?
I had a few that were uneasy, but all three of them were really good, you know, very supportive. And, you know, I kind of tried to reassure them because at that point I was 21 and I had my concealed carry permit. And so I had a gun on me. And, you know, I just kind of had to reassure them, you know, I don't know what's going to happen. But at the same time, your safety is more important than mine. And that's what I told them from day one. And I said, if something ever, you know, if you never feel comfortable, let me know. We'll figure something out. Like, I'll find another place. Like, I was prepared to find another place to live because at that point it was like, that's, I can't be responsible for that. Like, I would never forgive myself if something happened to one of them. Just the idea of thinking that something could happen to one of my loved ones is always on my mind. But at one point, you know, I even thought of taking myself out of the equation and just saying, you know, there's nobody to stop. There's not a problem. So that was the hardest point.
Let's pause for a quick ad break.
Jake and I recently took a fun online quiz for Care of, which is a wellness brand that sets you up with a customized vitamin plan that has vitamins and supplements delivered right to you. We answered easy questions like how much sleep do you get and how often do you work out?
It's great because the vitamin aisle can be a little confusing, and sometimes I never know what to get or where to start. Care of can make taking your vitamins and supporting your health goals attainable.
They personalized my order and included their new line, the Skin and Hair Collection, which helps you work on your beauty goals with a combination of targeted ingredients for hair, skin, and nails. That's what I like the best. My beauty routines are so important to me, and Care of made everything so hassle-free.
You can see and taste the quality. They're focused on the quality science and research that goes into each of their products and recommendations, as well as the yummy protein powders that are made of real ingredients like organic cocoa and pink Himalayan sea salt that come in eco-friendly packs made of compostable films.
To take the quiz and get your personalized vitamins and supplements delivered right to you, just go to takecareof.com.
And for 50% off of your first Care of order, enter code STALKING50. That's STALKING50.
That's takecareof.com and enter code STALKING50. That's STALKING50 for 50% off your first order. Do it today. How did life change after you graduated?
After I graduated, you know, everything, we had still had things going on up until graduation. But I was excited. You know, I was going to go back home to start my business and just start, you know, looking for jobs and just using these new skills for different things. And so it was really exciting. And for the first couple months when I moved back, everything was fine. But you know, at that point, I knew he could go away for a couple months and he'd always come back. So it was never a time where I'm like, oh goodness, I'm free. Like, thank God. No, it was never that way. But I started doing my business. I started, um, you know, doing little film jobs on the weekend for indie films and TV shows, and I loved it. And then I actually started taking care. I did a caregiver job, and so I did that during the week, and then I had my film stuff on the weekends and at nights. And so I actually wound up moving into my own place out in the middle of nowhere, and I loved it. It was really exciting. You know, this is my first place. I'm living on my own. Like, it was exciting, and, you know, my friend lives next door, so it was a really cool time in my life. I was, you know, having a decently successful makeup business, and for someone, like, who's just starting out, and it was great, and, um, then he found me again. I came home one day, and I found, a note on my front door, and it said, I found you, invisible girl. And so that's when, everything started just even more like getting worse.
So, what are the things after that note did he bring into your life?
Well, I started getting flowers. So after I left my caregiver job, I was able to get another job um, at a museum, and it was right in my skill set, and I really loved it. And everything was good at work. I was, finally in a position where, I was making good money and things were going good. And I started getting flowers. I started getting more notes. I actually started getting text messages. The day I got my first text message, it actually appeared on my phone that it was coming from my manager. And we have two buildings on our premises. And so I was at one building and I got a text message and it was from my manager and it said, or I thought it was from my manager, and it said, "Can you come to the other building?" And so I remember walking across, and like as I was walking across, he said, "I need you here now." So I went in fast and I went to the office. I said, "Hey boss, what's up?" And he looked at me and he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I got this text message from you. It seemed pretty serious." Which in the back of my mind, looking at it now, is kind of sketchy because at the building he could have called me over our phones. He could have, you know, called me on one of the radios that we have, but you know, at that time I didn't think anything about it. And he said, "I didn't call you. I just got off a conference call. You could look at my phone." And there was nothing there, like, he hadn't texted me at all, and I thought it was weird, and I was like, "Well, I don't know what to think." And so I went back to the other building, and as I was walking back across, I got another text message, and it said, "I need you to come to the office now. Like, come again, come back." And at that point, I started walking across, and it just got angry, and it said, um, I need you to come to the fucking office right now." And I was like, "My manager would never say something like that." And that's when I realized something was wrong. And I kind of just stood there because I'm in this parking lot and we're in a big area. So around us, we have restaurants, we have hotel rooms, we have all kinds of things here. And so I just felt so vulnerable because this guy is standing here watching me and I can't even see him. Like he knows exactly where I'm at. And so it progressed from there. He would text me and say, "I don't like your hair like that." And I'd be, if I was walking outside or walking to my car, and he would know what I was wearing. That's when I contacted the local police here. I had always called the police every time something happened, but this is when I got detectives involved. And so they tried their best to sort of like figure out what's going on. But when they pinged the phone, like the number, it actually came from like, it looked like it was coming from my phone. And, obviously that wasn't happening. So they actually watched my phone for a little bit and they couldn't figure it out. But one of the detectives told me there's like an app that you can do, you can put anybody's phone number in and you can make it look like it's coming from anybody. And that's when I really started freaking out because, who's to say he's not going to text me from my mom's phone and say, "Hey, I need you, to come outside," or, anything like that. I started texting my manager phone, and then it actually went to a blocked number. It said blocked. And so after that, because he kind of knew as soon as I stopped and like was looking around, he knew that I knew, I guess. And so it progressed from there. I was getting flowers like every month, at least once a month. We had contacted the florist. We couldn't get any information. Like they had all been prepaid for, and they're not allowed to get any information out of the like buyer. Um, and the police, were involved at one point, but we couldn't get anything off of them. And so the night, one of the days I was at work, I actually got a text message, and it said, I had just gotten a new car, and it said, "I see you got a new ride. It'd be a shame if somebody blew it up." And it said blink, 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 but when will it go off? And I was at work, and so we're, a museum, so we've got people inside, and so I was like, I went to my manager, so I'm like, "This is what's going on. I don't know." So we called the police. We actually had a member of the bomb squad come out quietly. Like, they didn't come in, like, full guns blazing. And he found, like, a little button on the back of my car. And thankfully, it turned out to be nothing. It wasn't, any kind of tracking device or a bomb. But it was still at that moment that he came to the museum, and he was in our parking lot. He was maybe 20 feet away from me, because in my office, I park right next to my office. He was that close, and I didn't know it. And we have, like, so many cameras outside, and we still weren't able to detect him. So he was either wearing a hat or, wearing a disguise, because we have people come through, and so you really can't tell. So he was smooth about it. He just laid it on there and just walked in like nothing had happened. So I didn't know if he came into the museum. I didn't know, where he was, but he was there. So, but that was probably one of the scariest times.
So you had to tell your employers across the board, like, from school to like every time you went in. So you had, how did that make you feel to have to reveal this information to them?
It's really shameful. I felt like, this is something that I keep private. It's my burden to bear. Like, and so I always hated telling them, but, when it involved other people, I had to. And so, um, I think the biggest thing was I didn't like the attention. Like, um, unfortunately, when you work for a big company and you have people like here at the museum, people are always talking. And thankfully, most of my coworkers it was more out of concern, out of, rather than gossip. But just knowing that, they're going to see these flowers coming in, or they're going to see me, like, the police show up, like, that's what it gave me even more anxiety, because it's like people are going to, talk about it. And I hated that. I hated the attention. I didn't want to, I didn't want that kind of attention.
Were most people supportive when you told them? How did they react?
Most people were really supportive. Like, my good friends were, had my backup. I think at the beginning, my parents had to ask some tough questions, which, is common. You have to we're trying to figure out who this person is. And still to this day, I don't know who it is. My parents would sit, outside the daycare and the pizza place, and they would watch. They would sit there for hours, just watch from their cars to see if we could get any information. So I had a really good support team, and, all of my friends were really good. But even with that support team, you still feel alone. Like, this person is, like, attacking you, and unless you've been through it yourself, nobody's really gonna understand what's going on.
So, what did the cops say? I mean, were they ever able to give you any indication of who this person was?
I had one good police officer. So one night I was at home, and I was walking my dogs. It was late. I think it was the weekend, and I was just walking the dogs, and all of a sudden I heard something moving, because I'm surrounded by woods and it's dark out there. I heard something moving, and all of a sudden it sounded like somebody was running, and just like barely I could see a t-shirt, like a white t-shirt in the dark, running through the woods. And I freaked out, and, I went inside, I took the dogs in, I called the police, and this officer showed up. This police officer was really good. I had gotten a picture of the tag of the truck that I believed he was driving. I had come out of school one day, and one of the teachers had said, "There's this white truck that's been circling the building for the last 2 hours." And so I pulled out, and he was right in front of me, and he saw me, and I could see him look in his rear view, and he tried to speed off. Well, I was able to snap a picture, but the first part of the license plate was really blurry. And then the second part, we had that information, but I'd been told by, like, all kinds of police my whole time that they couldn't get any information off of it. Well, this police officer's like, "I don't know why they would say that to you. We can figure it out. It's like a pattern." And so he figured it out. He traced it to a man that was living not too far from the school where my mom taught. And I was student teaching with her back when this first started happening. So that sort of made sense. But the man that owned the truck wasn't the person that was following me and stalking me. Obviously, they couldn't give me his address, but they gave me his name, and so I started, like, scourging social media, trying to find any connection to this guy that was following me, and I couldn't get anything.
So, did they ask the guy who owned the truck, like, if they knew Somebody with long black hair? What did he say?
Well, this was a different county, so they really didn't have the jurisdiction to do it, and they also can't just pull up to somebody's house and say, "Hey, like you following this girl around?" Like, there has to be some kind of like warrant out or something, is what he told me. And so, but he was really patient with me and just really tried his best to do everything he could for me. So there are good ones out there, and so that was, a relief, but at the same time, there's nothing, you're stuck. You're still stuck.
Yeah.
It was frustrating.
Do you think that showcases like a flaw in the anti-stalking laws?
I don't want to bash any police officers because, there are the good and they are serving us and they do, a great job most of the time. But there are some that are out there that don't take this as seriously, as they probably should. I understand that there's not a lot you can do to catch a stalker, and especially in my case, I don't know this person. I don't have any idea who this person is. So I understand in my case that there's like they're limited at what they can do. What I do wish would happen, and I would like to see, is that um, they would be trained in order to like handle victims, and because when you're sitting there, you're scared for your life. Somebody, this guy has just shown up and they're telling you they can't find him, like, you need to calm down. Um, and are you sure this is actually happening? That is devastating. That's like being stabbed in the heart a couple of times. Just, somebody saying, are you sure this is happening? And it's like, why would I waste my time? And so I think that's one thing, is like a training on how you could, you know, better be equipped to talk to victims and understand what they're going through. But I also think maybe a registry would be a good idea, much like sex offenders, because more than likely, and this is what breaks my heart the most, is most stalkers stalk other people. And I think, that's what hurts me when I think about it, is, somebody else has had to go through this. And like the idea that the guy that's following me is following someone else and has put me or put them through the same mental torment that he's put me through is just devastating. Like, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. So the idea that if somebody does get arrested for it or gets charged with stalking and they could be put on a registry, I think that would help out a lot. I think it would be more like realistic to people, and they would understand, this happens more often than people think, and this is happening. It's not just movies, it's not just TV shows. Like, this is happening, to so many people. It could be your best friend, it could be your mom, like, you never know.
When did you start fighting back?
Um, I knew right away that I was gonna have to take care of things myself, but I think it took me a couple of years to realize, the only person that's gonna save me at the end of the story is me. It's not gonna be anybody else. It's not gonna be the police. And so I actually wound up writing a note to my stalker and left it in my car. This is before I went to school. And it basically said, "I forgive you. I hope you'll get help, but I'll do whatever it takes to protect myself and my family." Whenever he did read it, he had thrown it on the ground, and then he ripped the grill off of the front of my car and then knocked off my passenger side mirror. Well, at that point, I was like, this could get worse. And so I got my concealed carry permit. I started getting help. I actually didn't start counseling until about a year ago, after the break in at my house.
Tell us about when he broke into your house.
So I had gone to the gym that night and I was coming home and I noticed all the lights on my house were on, which are really uncommon. Like, I'll usually leave like one light on for my dogs and that's it. But I walked inside and my dogs were out of their cage, and I was renovating at the time. So I was pulling up floor. So I had like a utility knife and all kinds of stuff out. But I realized, there was this knife. My couch had been torn to shreds. Had been stabbed a couple of times, like with this utility knife. And there was a photo album out, and it had all my pictures from like my senior prom, and all of my photos of my face had been torn up and like cut up. And I walked into my room, and it was clear that somebody had laid on the bed. Um, and there was a bunch of like my undergarments like strewn around the room. And the room was just in complete like shambles. And I remember calling the police, and I said, like, I was like, okay, finally, maybe they'll take fingerprints. Maybe they'll finally start taking this seriously because he has gotten into my house, and they didn't. Which was that was devastating. I remember like screaming at a police officer, and I would never do that in in any other case. But I was just like, why? Like, you see, this is happening. You see, like, this is like real time. What would have happened if I was home? I mean, I would have shot him if I was home, and I think he knows that. Um, but at the same time, it was just so frustrating that the police are like, we're not gonna take the time to do that. So, but it was, I think, I think it was more of a miracle that he didn't do anything to my dogs, that they were okay. Um, but that was devastating. My one place of sanctuary, the one place I could hide, like even though he'd been outside, it was still my sanctuary. Like that was still my hiding place had been, breached. Like he'd gotten in and destroyed it. So that was heartbreaking.
So how did it make you feel? Like, so basically he was, was he breaking your car constantly, or was it just something you knew that he had access to it? And then the same thing with the house. Were these things like, obviously was there any place you could go to feel safe?
Since this started happening, I don't think I've ever had a sense of security. Um, Even if like right now, like being at work, I'm behind like two steel like double like bolted doors. But I always, that piece of security, that sense of safety was taken from me when that started happening. But I did, my parents, I stayed with them after the break-in, and my car, we even got an advanced security system that they assured us that nobody could get into. And he actually wound up getting into it anyway. So I knew this guy was smart. I knew, you know, he he's an intelligent person, but at the same time, he's very um, just demented. He has some kind of issue. I know that, and so that's what scares me the most. Is he's smart. He knows it. It seems like he's done this before, and again, that's what really breaks my heart, is to think that somebody else is going through this or has gone through this.
So after the last, break-in, then what happened?
The next step was I installed more cameras. I have so many cameras on the house right now. I, you know, I had friends come over a lot. I had my neighbors come over a lot. I had my brother stay with me a little bit. My mom stayed with me for a while, because that was another dark point in my life where I was like, okay, this is never going to end. Um, but, you know, one day I just realized, you grow used to it. It's like living with an illness or a sickness. You have your bad days and you have your good days, and you have to just kind of learn what makes you functional, and you know um, do the things that you have to have, a sense of realizing that it's just one step at a time, and you have to go each day and live each day. And so I actually started, that's when I started getting therapy. I reached out and started getting help. And I realized that my mission now is to stop this guy at any rate, because again, the idea that he could do this to someone else is what drives me to keep, live every day to make sure that I'm making these reports and I have all the evidence, and, you know, that I can stop him one day.
Are you any closer to finding out who he is? Do you think you'll ever find out who he is?
I don't know. I think the only way that I'll ever be able to know is if we catch him. Because I just don't have any clue. There was years and years where I've tried to rack my brain trying to think who this is or trying to find out any information, but he's good and he knows that. But I know that one day he'll mess up. And I know that one day he will get caught. And whether it's by him stopping by the house and he, gets too close and I take care of business, or, he messes up and we catch him on a camera. I don't know if I'll ever catch him. I don't know if it'll ever stop, but that's still, just the promise of tomorrow is it's, one day he'll mess up and one day it'll get better. So
Have you ever caught him on camera at all?
I've never caught him on camera because he would either at one point I had like wired cameras. I've since moved to battery powered that are screwed onto like the house, so he can't rip them off. But like he would rip the like cords out so he could get past the cameras, or he would um, like at night. Like I said, it's dark in the woods, you can't see anything, so he'd stay there and watch where he knew he wouldn't be caught. He couldn't. But that's the thing. He's a coward at some point because he won't. He doesn't want to get caught because he enjoys this game too much. So I've never actually caught him on camera. I did have an artist friend do a sketch for me, which has helped out a lot. I was actually able to give it to my local police department, and they hung it up, which is a step in the right direction. It's not a lot, but it's all I have is that one day maybe somebody will see it and say, "Oh my gosh, I know who that is." And so we're moving in the right direction. It's just slow. So, but progress is progress.
So this is basically taken almost a decade of your life at this point, right?
I actually got flowers at the museum, and the card, I had a balloon on it that said happy anniversary. And it on the note it said happy like 8 years, invisible girl. So he was actually stalking me when I was a minor. So that's gonna be the hard thing is, once we do catch this guys, I'm gonna hope and pray that we can connect him to everything because if we can't, we don't have a case. So I'm hoping that all my years worth of evidence, I hope that, if it does come down to that, they'll be able to prove that it was him doing it because otherwise he's free.
Do you have any idea where he is now?
I don't. It's actually been 4 months. It's been really quiet. Um, Nothing's happened, but I treat every day the same way. I always look over my shoulder. I triple check, my locks on my house. I set the security system when I leave. You know, it's something you come to live with every day. It's just part of your routine. You know what you're doing. You know what you're planning, and it's just like I said. It's just a disease you learn to live with, and it's nice right now because it's quiet. But who's to say in like 20 minutes something won't happen, or 2 days? It could be 2 years. I never know, and so I always have to be prepared no matter what.
In the actual notes, do you have any clue why he called you the Invisible Girl?
I have no idea. Like, he always referred to himself as the Invisible Man, so I don't know, um, why he referred to me as that. But, you know, as things progressed, that's exactly how I started feeling. I started feeling invisible because nobody was helping me. I felt like, I'd tell somebody about it and nothing would happen.
What advice would you have for someone who's being stalked?
Definitely reach out. I mean, more than likely, you'll have the police that, are gonna treat you like you're crazy, but there are also good ones out there. So reach out to your local law enforcement. Learn as much about stalking as you can. Learn as much about it. I think the best thing that I did when it first started happening was I went to the national, what is it, the National Victims of Crime website, and they
Yeah.
actually have a stalking like section just for people that are going through this and take extensive notes. I mean, I have how I was feeling when it happened. I have the police officers I spoke to. I have like pictures of the evidence. I have like anything you can imagine, like just in this binder. And it's like a big binder. So you have all this information. The more, like, the better it will look. Like, I even wrote down, like, I had a couple times, more than a couple, where I would call the police and I'd write down, like, what time I called them, what time they showed up. But sometimes they wouldn't show up, and I'd say, you know, department didn't show up, called again, this is who I spoke to. finally got somebody to show up. Like, you have to be detailed. So definitely taking extensive notes and just, being more aware of your situation. Like, one of the things I learned was, even though it's extremely hard at first, whenever you walk near somebody, you always look them in the eyes. You always look them in the eyes. It's better, like, if you say, like, hello or anything, even if you're just passing them by, because that lets them know that that they're there and you're aware of what's going on. Like, if you work late, have somebody walk you to your car, like, always text somebody, tell them, where you're going, what time you're going, and, what time you'll be there. Just, cover all your boundaries. If somebody's following you home, take a different route home. Just change it up. And if you know they're following you, stop stop at the police department. Like, just keep extensive notes. Keep extensive notes. Um, and even on your hardest days, even on the days that it's hardest to fight back, make sure that you have somebody that you can, call on, because there will be dark times. And if you have somebody that can, pull you back out of that darkness and get you back to, a decent place, then you can realize that you can just make it back. So definitely having a good support system, taking good notes, keeping copies of everything, and just, fight back, fight back. So, and they're not alone. This happens to so many people, and I think that was one of the best things I found in your podcast, is that, I'm not alone, because you can tell your family, you can tell your friends all day long what you're going through, and they'll never understand. But listening to this podcast and the way people are stepping up and telling their stories, you see people are going through a lot worse situations than I am, and they're still making it, and they're working every day to do what they can to make this a better planet and bring this to awareness. So that's definitely a great thing to have. When you're looking at it and you're in your dark points, there's dark things that go through your mind. You're like, I want this guy, to see justice. But at the same time, I had to step back at one point, just reading some of the notes, and say, this person is not mentally well. This person is not okay. And you have to realize that most monsters, I've referred to him that way a couple of times, are not, like, they are not born that way. They've been through something in their life that, has caused them to become this person. And so I want to see this person get help. I want to see this person, I want justice for all of us that have had to go through it, but I also want to see this person get help.
Liz, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you guys so much. This whole podcast and this whole experience, I feel like, is a good way to start a new part of the chapter and start taking back some of what I've lost in this progress. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for coming
course.
on. If anyone out there is in need of help or is a victim of stalking, please reach out. You can find a list of resources on our Instagram at Strictly Stalking Pod.
You can now watch the videos of all our episodes on YouTube at www.youtube.com/strictlystalkingpod. I'm Jake Deptula.
And I'm Jamie Beebe. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Strictly Stalking.